Welcome to a new episode of Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret podcast. I'm your host, Teresa Melito-Conners, a PhD-level self-care expert in the greater Boston area with a passion for helping others recognize the importance of caring for themselves. Today, before we dive into the interview, I'd like to chat with you about the 10 domains of self-care. When we talk about self-care, this is not bubble baths and mani-pedis. This research comes from Dr. Cook Cotton, and I regularly reference this a lot, the different domains of self-care, but I realize I haven't talked about it on my podcast. So here we go. So the 10 domains, brief overview. And please don't let this be overwhelming to you. I'm not saying you have to do all these things every single day to hit every single domain. That's not realistic. But think about, maybe where you have some areas of strength or where you have some areas of weakness. So the first domain is the nutrition and hydration domain. Generally speaking, we need to eat more and drink more water. We're chronically dehydrated. So here's where we can get into, maybe mindful eating or intuitive eating and just setting ourselves up for success in how we feed our body and hydrate and make sure that we are doing that from a place of love, honoring our body, and not from a place of restriction. The next domain is the exercise domain. You have to move your body. But here's the good news. It should be joyful. So reconnect with movement in ways that feel good. It doesn't have to be excessive or extreme. Maybe 5-minute dance parties are your thing. They're certainly mine. So see, though, how you can invite more joyful movement into your life. Next is soothing strategies. So this is where deep breathing can be really great, and other ways that we can soothe ourselves, maybe sounds or tactile sensations or doing something creative can be great in this domain. Next is self-awareness and mindfulness, where we really see how we can invite more of just being in the present moment into our lives and how we make sure we're taking care of ourselves and we're aware of our thought, our body and our actions. And the next domain is the rest domain. Did you know that you should feel rested and restored when you wake up in the morning? I know, 7 to 9 hours a night, but also, plan restful breaks, take a day off, use your paid time off. The next domain is our relationship domain. This is where we want to spend time and make time for people who are good to us, who believe in us, support us, sustain us, encourage us, respect us. Our next domain is physical medical, where we want to make sure that we are engaging in the care of our physical body by going to the doctor, making sure we have medical professionals who are partners with us in our healthcare. We go to the dentist and all that good stuff. Any specialists that you have to see, that you take the time to do that, to keep up with that. Next is our environmental domain. This is where we want to evaluate our environments. Are they cluttered and chaotic and disorganized? Or what type of schedule do you maintain? And do you prioritize what's important to you or the demands of others? So we look at that. The next domain is self-compassion. And this is really about how you talk to yourself and about yourself, that you're coming from a place of love, kindly honoring challenges and difficulties and not engaging in critical, harsh, judgmental, negative self-talk. And lastly, but certainly not least, is the spiritual domain. And this is where you want to see meaning for yourself, that you set goals and kind of see the larger purpose in life. You may want to take out time to help someone else, maybe volunteer at a soup kitchen or spend time in a spiritual place, whatever that means for you. So that's a really quick overview of the 10 domains of self-care. And again, maybe you can already see where you have some strengths and where you have some weaknesses. And if you take one new coping strategy, just one little thing that you're going to start doing, maybe it's increasing your hydration or working on getting your 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, whatever it is, start small, but you must start reprioritizing yourself. So you're putting your needs first. So without further delay, I am so excited today to welcome Dr. Christopher Willard to the podcast. Dr. Willard is a clinical psychologist, author, and consultant based in Massachusetts. He has been invited to more than 24 countries to speak and has presented at 2 TEDx events. He is the author of 20 books, including Alpha Breaths, Growing Up Mindful, and How We Grow Through What We Go Through. His thoughts on mental health have been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, mindful.org, CNN.com, and elsewhere. He also teaches at Harvard Medical School. I have been following Dr. Willard's work for several years now, and I regularly reference his materials in my presentations as well. I'm a big fan of his Alpha Breaths and the Breathing book. I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Willard, for joining me this afternoon on the Dr. MC Self-Care Cabaret podcast. I'm delighted to chat with you.
It's awesome to be together, like virtually, but still to be connected, Dr. MC. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to dive right in. I am just question number one. How do you like to practice self-care?
I think one thing for me is that it evolves a lot over time, kind of depending on what's going on. Like, sometimes it's sleep, sometimes it's exercise, often it's meditation and mindfulness. But I think doing something for myself that just feels like it's not something actually just talking about this with a client today, but like something that's not competitive, that just gets me not thinking about all that other stuff in my life. Like this client today was talking about rock climbing being sort of his outlet. And so I think, it's doing anything that really kind of just gets me out of my head in some ways. And again, I think that's different at different times in my life. And, these days it's spending time with my kids, which has been absolutely awesome. But then that can get exhausting too. So
sure.
it's a big range of stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Creative activities like making things, writing things, like these are also feel like really, really important to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think you touched upon several domains there in your answer, talking about, moving your body, mindfulness, of course, meditation can be a part of it, but also having those creative outlets is really cool. And I love how you said that it evolves over time. I think that that's really important because a lot of times we get stuck in kind of what this idea of perfection should be, and that we feel like, well, we have to do it this way, and this is how I've been taught to do it. But it's okay if that evolves, or maybe you no longer like doing something, so you want to shift and do something else.
Absolutely. I think like at times in my life, it's been like traveling, and other times it's been, cooking, then the pandemic, I just got really sick of cooking.
There was a lot of cooking during the pandemic.
It keeps really shifting. Yeah. Unfortunately, we got sick of a lot of our favorite self-care activities during the pandemic.
Oh no. But that probably forced you to maybe try some new ones.
Well, that's true. Right. I mean, I think one thing that was amazing about the pandemic is like really getting back into nature a lot more, which had been such an important thing for me when I was younger. And then like having a chance to like go out with the kids and like take nature walks and do things like that has been, really wonderful to like reconnect with some of those things. And,
absolutely.
It's funny, actually, a couple of weeks ago, we were driving out to the, a nice place where we used to go walking a lot during the pandemic, Great Meadows. And my kid's like, where are we going? I was like, oh, we're going on a nature walk. And my son's like, isn't that a pandemic thing? And I was like, dude, no, like, come on, nature walks are awesome. Like, come on.
Oh, gosh. That's funny. I love that though. Definitely that reconnecting. I felt like early on in COVID was a lot about reconnecting maybe to things you had not previously found time to do, or just hadn't been able to. Like I found myself, digging out old art supplies of things that I hadn't done in a long time, and wanting to really just have that creative outlet and reconnecting with things that used to bring me joy that, adult life gets in the way and I hadn't done in a while. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And I noticed on social media recently that you are actually hosting a self-care challenge coming up.
That is like a theme I'm doing right now. Yeah, totally.
So what, can you tell me or give us a little sneak peek? I'm not sure what the timing is of that, but maybe some of the practices or things you'll be looking for folks to engage with you during that time.
Like, I think, there's so many different aspects of self-care that sometimes, I do like I do a lot of trainings for professionals and trainings for educators, and people are like, okay, like, shut up, stop telling me just to breathe. Like, I need something more substantial, or like, I don't have time for that, or this is stupid. And I get it, right? It's like, we are busier. And I think educators, parents, clinicians, everybody listening, like needs, like there's just so many bigger systemic issues, right? Than just us as individuals doing, some pieces of self-care that also feels like who's got the time. But I think also, one thing I've been doing these past few years is creating these little like month-long challenges on Instagram and stuff, where it's like, here's just like a little thing you can do today. Like just take a shower with all your senses. Like you don't have to spend a half an hour eating a raisin, but just take like the first 3 bites of your meal a little more mindfully, right?
Sure.
Like these kinds of things, like get the takeout tonight, leave the dishes till tomorrow. Like even like the little silly stuff like that is like, just can make the difference, or just something that just takes the pressure off of ourselves a little bit. Look at beautiful artwork, like, just put on a favorite song and don't do anything else. Like I was just laying in the hammock outside. It's like, wow, like finally nice day. Like I'm laying in the hammock, like these little things that we can do. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to have a spa day. Like, yeah, I wish I had time for a spa day. Right. Like, but I've got kids, I've got a job. I'm like isolated with COVID. I mean, it's like just all this, it's like, so how can we find these little moments of self-care that can start to add up? And that's what's been kind of fun about putting together this particular challenge, is thinking about like, what are those little things we can do? And then self-care is also like, again, like I saw this like in a meme, but it's not me, but it's like I found this other powerful thing. It's like self-care is also, it's not just like bubble baths. It's also like, how do we set healthy boundaries with people?
Yes.
Right? Like that's actually a really huge part of self-care that we often forget. Like it's not, it's not indulging ourselves. And I think really trying to figure out like there's self-indulgence and there's self-care. And I think in our society, it's like, oh, like taking time for myself is self-indulgent, but self-care is like, drinking too much or eating too much or shopping too much or retail therapy. It's like, no, like that actually is self-indulgence. And it's not like one is bad and one is good, everything in moderation, but like, how do we find something that's sustainable self-care, something that's a bit more in the middle? I feel like that's really important when we think about what's sustainable self-care. Like, cause I can't go to the spa every day. I can even think about when I can next go to the spa, even if I could, right? But it's
100%. I love so much of everything you just said, like all of it, because it's really important. And I think we're even going to call this episode Sustainable Self-Care, because I try so much in my work to push to people that like, no, it's like interwoven into everything you do. And it's not just like, that spa day, that's great, but like that's a one and done. That's not self-care. Right. And like self-care isn't what we don't wait for, summer vacation or April school break or, a holiday that's like, oh, now's my self-care time. No, like this is and those little practices are so valuable.
Yeah. And they add up, right? It's also like nothing fixes it. Not even a day at the spa or a month at the spa means like we're suddenly like, no more stress, right? It's like everything adds up a little bit, and we have to like tune in. And I think this is where mindfulness comes in. How do I tune into myself to notice, okay, like I am feeling a little bit better today, like, or maybe not, but like that these little micro moments, they do add up. None of them fixes it, but they're all additive in some way. And I think that's also really important. And that is where like having self-awareness is really important.
That is one of the domains of self-care for sure. And I love telling people, like in my workshops, I always give like, it's been described that I kind of present like a self-care buffet, like so many ideas and different things. And then I always though have to point out, I'm like, everything we've talked about can be accessed for free. And usually like, you start to see like the light bulb go off and they're like, oh yeah, it's like none of this. I'm not talking about expensive things, even things that take a long time. It's like these can be little quick things, little quick mindfulness practices, a quick breathing exercise, a quick walk, a few minutes in the hammock, a few minutes drawing, or a 5-minute dance party, or like these quick things have dramatic impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I love that. I'm so glad we're on the same page with that. And I know, I know you have a lot of experience working with children and teaching them breathing and mindfulness. I think I have, I have your ninja deck that you did with Dr. Ablett, and I'm blanking on the other gentleman's name that did the deck with you.
Sensei Kuwahara. Yeah.
And I think I have your Growing Mindful deck that you did with, I think you did that with
That was
Dr.
also
Ablett
Mitch.
also.
Yeah.
Yeah, a long time ago. And I use that regularly. I love that one. And I have Alpha Breaths and the breathing book. Oh, funny story about the breathing book. I I saw something you posted on Twitter. This was a long time ago. Whenever I think maybe when it first came out, and I was like, oh wow, this looks awesome. And I purchased it, not knowing that it was really like a book for kids. I thought it was like an adult book, and I got it, and I was like, oh, I'm still keeping this. I like
all
this.
right. That was
But I
the
definitely
best review like I got was someone wrote and was like someone, I don't know, some children's book reviewer was like, because it came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. And
yes.
she was like, you have no idea how much this book has like helped me through this last month, because it came out like April or May of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, that is so sweet. You're like 35 years old. Like, oh my God, like that. Like that's like the biggest compliment imaginable, that book was like a really sweet companion for you as an
absolutely
adult.
no, and it came out like it just, I got it and I was like, oh, I missed this. I didn't realize it was a little kid's book, but I'm into it. I'm here. I'm in it to win it. So I'm wondering if you have like, maybe a favorite, or maybe your top 2 favorite mindfulness or breathing practices that you like to do with kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think it keeps like evolving all the time. And my friend Danielle and I, we have a sequel coming out to Alpha Breaths, which we're super pumped for. It's going to be out in September. And I think what's been really fun with things like Alpha Breaths is that it lets like just sort of going back to schools to do readings. And it's like, I'll read one book and then I'll do some of the Alpha Breath stuff. And then I'll ask the kids to make up their own practices.
Love it.
And then they start having so much fun making up their own breathing practices. And my daughter is like, she's 4 right now. She's like hardcore unicorns and rainbows and stuff. And like, she's like, Dad, like a unicorn, can we make it like a unicorn alphabet breath, like alpha breath, like, like roll back your wings and like, like push out with your horn, like as you're breathing in and breathing out. I mean, these little things. She also, I know where, this is audio, but she also did that little, like make a heart with your hands thing. Yep. You can't do it. But she was like, this is like the heart alpha breath, like breathe out and then breathe in and make a little heart.
How
I was like,
cute is that?
This is the best. Let's go. And like Alpha Breath 3, if they ever let us write it.
Oh my God. The next gen Alpha Breaths. I love it. That's awesome.
I know these books are writing themselves.
Seriously.
It's like, that's been like so much fun with the little kids and with teenagers too. Like, some of them will like write their own, actually this kid, I saw him yesterday. I've seen him for like 10 years. He's in college now. But like, I remember when he was in like 7th or 8th grade, like working with him around anxiety, and he like wrote his own like visualization that he like shared with me. And I was beautiful. Like, dude, this is so awesome. Like, so letting teenagers like, or listening to music mindfully, like things like that, I think are just so empowering as kids get older and into the teenage years, where maybe a unicorn breath might not fly for a
high school. It might not be cool enough for a high school kid. Oh, I love it. That's beautiful. Actually, one of the things I have in the works, I won't reveal too much right now, but I am actually working on a program for high school students, all centered around this program, because we're experiencing such a dramatic increase in mental health issues, and I mean every day there's a headline that's just breaks your heart. And yeah, my goodness. And, we got to keep fighting this fight and doing this work to help these kiddos. So I very much admire the work that you're doing with all of that. And I love that. And I love the idea of letting them create their own. I think that's so much fun, and what great buy-in too. Right. Totally. I mean, I think because that's what started, was this kid I worked with who started making up some of his own breaths. And I was like, and then he would do them because he's like, oh, doctor, I made this up with Dr. Willard. He put it in his book. I was like, yeah. Like, and so it's amazing. Just as like with adults, it's like, like as a therapist, like, I could tell someone what to do because it's like, stop drinking so much, right? Or whatever. And it's like, it's like, if that worked, like I'd be out of a job and they wouldn't be drinking. Sure. It's like, people have to come to that idea themselves. Right. And so part of being a therapist in some ways, almost like tricking people into thinking they came up with it themselves. And I think with kids too, it's like letting them invent their own practice and maybe nudging them along. It's like, they have that ownership over it in a different way, right? Even if it's like, I know that where this is going, like,
it's still like, well, they feel like they created it and then they're going to do it. And I think that's what's so key. And they're going to go home and say, Mom and Dad, I invented this, like this cool breathing practice. Do you want to check it out? I'm going to share this with my friends. I'm going to like, and then it's just a totally different thing than like, hey, do this breath. Right. Or hey, do this visualization. Like then they really start to lock in such a totally different way.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I love that too, when they make the connection and then they start sharing it at home and they really start doing it. There was, reminds me of a really cool story. My mom just retired last year after 32 years in the public school system. And she was a pretty cool high school art teacher, which art can sometimes lend itself to those, therapeutic moments, maybe more than math class can. And they were doing some sort of community event, and she was actually teaching Reiki to her students. And just like she did like this little Reiki exercise and like told them about it. I think she brought in some scented things and kind of set the stage for them and talked about Reiki, because she was actually Reiki 1 certified at the time. I had done that with her. Wow. And so anyway, she brought it into her classroom, and one of her students, the captain of the football team, so, we can keep that stereotype in our mind. And he went home and like set it up, took one of his like candles from his mom and like set up the whole thing, and wanted to show her what he had learned in art class about Reiki and this whole like mindfulness thing and whatever. And the mom actually then sent my mom an email like, the next day, and was like, I could not believe that my high school senior son, captain of the football team, just taught me Reiki. Like, could you be any cooler of a teacher? Yeah, no, it was amazing. It was such a highlight for her too, because she was just like it resonated with him so much. I mean, that's the point. That's what we hope, right? But it was just really beautiful. So that reminds me of what you were talking about too, like really like getting that hook, and then they want the ownership of it, and they'll never forget that stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering too, like, we talked about kids. So what about, parents and caregivers are struggling right now too, and teachers and, oh man, everybody across the board. So what is there, like, I don't know, a tip or a coping technique or strategy that you would recommend for folks right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think in this pandemic, like one thing that's been helpful is really just remembering that we're not alone. It's like, okay, no one else has been a teacher in a pandemic before. Like no one else has been a parent in a pandemic before. Like, and we're all muddling along. We're all screwing this up. We have all lost it with our kids, like whether it's our students or our clients or our own children. And like, none of us is perfect. Like I was just a kind of, traveling and doing a bunch of workshops last week. And I was talking a lot about this. It's like just being kind to yourself, having self-compassion, forgiving yourself. Like it's important that we like model self-care also, so that like when we are stressed out, like we're like, hey, Dad's super stressed out. I'm going to take a few breaths. Do you want to do that with me? Like we're in traffic, like, it's super stressful. Like, let's notice like the birds around us chirping and not just the ugly cars in front of us, like things like this. Or like, I kind of got upset with my wife a few weeks ago and my email stopped working. It wasn't her fault, but I was just in a really bad mood and kind of snapped at her. I was like, okay, I lost my temper in front of the kids. Like, I'm going to have to like apologize in front of the kids. Like, it just is like, that's how I modeled this and how I have to model it. And so I think, like these kinds of things that when we practice our self-care as adults, we can do that in front of the kids, and it's sending such an important, powerful message to them.
Absolutely.
And again, like the more we can keep ourselves regulated, the more the kids can be well regulated. And still, like we still lose it. Like, and just being like, okay, how do I just move on? Or be like, yeah, Dad lost it earlier or whatever. And just know that we're all human. Like, a while ago, I was like sharing about like, oh my gosh, like mindfulness has finally kicked in with my kids. Like, I was like doing some visualizations with my kids before bedtime. And then there's this night a little bit ago where I was listening and my son was actually guiding his little sister in a meditation. Oh, so amazing, and then like 2 days later, like my son's like holding one of my mindfulness books. It's like, oh, that's awesome. Right. And then he like whacks his sister over the head with like the mindfulness book that I wrote. And I was like, okay, yep. Okay.
All right. Well, they're still kids.
Right? It's like, we're all human. Okay. Like, that's just what it is.
Oh my God.
Like,
No, that's
So,
really beautiful
yeah.
though. And I feel like not the whacking the sister on the head with the book, but the just the idea of, I say this too, I feel we're so on the same page here. I mean, my whole dissertation study was actually on self-care renewal for leaders and teachers, and not only practicing it, but how do you promote that for your staff? Because I
Right.
do feel like there's a disconnect there. And when we think about even parents and children, sometimes it
Yeah.
becomes like something that you do separate from them. And
hmm
I'm not a parent myself, so I'm
Yeah.
not in that role, but I think that, like you just said, bring them into it. Like you're modeling for them. Like
Yeah.
it's great. Let them see those moments, like that moment of you're human. So then you're going to take ownership of that, apologize, and continue to model that behavior for
Right.
them, but also like doing the mindfulness with them, teaching them
hmm
how to do the breathing and all of that. But then also knowing that like, yeah, not every moment's going to be perfect.
Right. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that. And I have talked to other, parents before, and I love that. Like when they're willing to kind of be vulnerable and bring that into how they parent, and but also
hmm
letting their kids like do yoga with them, like throw on a
Right.
YouTube video, do it with teach them. Don't make it this like thing that mom does that you can't talk to her during, or dad
Right.
does.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Awesome. So I know you have a lot of books out in the world. There's a lot of content. There's courses I'm seeing on social media. You're throwing all kinds of things out there. It's amazing. I love every bit of it. Where would you recommend someone starts? Like if they're maybe not super familiar with your work, like what's a good kind of place for them to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I wrote sort of probably the kind of bigger book I wrote for grownups is called Growing Up Mindful. And that's basically just like an overview about how to teach kids and teenagers mindfulness and how to practice yourself. And that's a really fun one. And then I've written a bunch of books for kids themselves. I think Alpha Breaths is a lot of fun, and the
It
breathing
is.
book and in between book are super fun. And then teach workshops all around Massachusetts and around the world. And so I'm often traveling for work and putting on workshops and trainings. And then it's been super fun more recently, I created, during the pandemic, just like a longer online training that's 10 weeks. And meets for a couple hours a week. And it's been so fun because I've had 100 people go through it now. And it's like literally like preschool curriculum designers from Singapore, and
Oh,
like
wow.
parents from Iran, and like autism activists from Indonesia, and like, a teacher from South Africa and Kenya, and like
Wow.
all over South America and Australia. Like it's been like just really a cool mix of people. And I kind of feel like I do some teaching and lecturing, and then I just sit back, and it's like, for me, it's like, oh, hearing about, oh, that's what you're doing, like with mindfulness and, I don't know, like Lebanon, like that's so cool. Like, it's been such a treat to meet people from around the world. I've always loved traveling. So working with people across cultures has been fun. And that's going to be rolling out again for like a summer session in June. And I'm psyched to kind of bring another group of 25 or 30 people together for that. And just have a lot of fun getting to know each other and learning from each other. So that's been the big fun thing I've been doing a lot more of lately. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And so it's basically like a mindfulness, an online kind of mindfulness course. You said 10 hours.
Absolutely. So it's 10 weeks. We meet live for an hour a week, and then there's about an hour's worth of videos to watch every week. That people can kind of like watch on their own time, listen to,
Sure.
or while they're in the
Self-paced
subway
or
or
whatever.
whatever, or in bed or between classes or something. So,
Oh, that's
because I know we're all
awesome.
kind of sick of watching stuff on Zoom. So I'm like, let me break this into smaller pieces. So
Sure.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So it's
really
been
great.
awesome.
And I'll make sure, everything is linked in the episode notes for
Thank
folks.
you.
And I think this episode will air before that June cohort starts. So
Oh, cool.
maybe if anybody wants to jump on that, they can do so. Would you mind telling us like where folks can find you, your website, social media handles, that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. Yep. drchristopherwillard.com, drchristopherwillard.com. And then at Dr. Chris Willard, same thing it's the same for everything, actually. I guess, like, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I haven't feel like I'm too old for TikTok. I don't know. I haven't figured it out, but
I haven't done the TikTok thing
that's
either.
where
I don't know.
you can find me.
I don't think our audiences are on TikTok, truthfully,
Right,
in the research
exactly.
I've done. But
Yeah,
you are very active on the social media channels that I follow you on, so that's great. So folks should definitely connect with you there. We'll make sure that is all linked in the episode notes. I'll link to some of your publications as well, some of my faves. And I do recommend any age can buy the breathing book and Alpha Breaths. I think it's a lot of fun. And I'll certainly, check out those other ones. But I want to thank you again so much for your time. This was a fabulous conversation. And I just feel like we have a lot of shared passions, and the work that we're doing aligns very much. And, I wish you well in all your endeavors.
Thank you. Have a good spring into summer. Hope you get a little time to relax this summer. And
I don't work all summer.
Longer, just moments of self-care.
Yes, I actually don't work all summer. So, I don't work my full-time job. I work on my Dr. MC stuff. So,
awesome.
So I'll be able to dive into that. So very cool. But anyway, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Good to see you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Amazing. Yes, to everything Dr. Willard had to share today. I love how aligned our work is with each other. So many of his suggestions are exactly the same things that I have been preaching in my work. This is real, friends. Self-care is not a luxury. Sustainable self-care is really what we're striving for. We need to get to the root of what makes you, you. And the practices that you engage in have to be sustainable and realistic. Otherwise, you're not going to stick with it. So engage in the practices that support you. Start small. Start today. This is really, really valuable. And I love the idea of creating your own breath. Maybe you can design your own breath as adults. This doesn't have to just be something for kids. I think it would be kind of fun. I'd probably have a breath that had something to do with dancing. I'm going to have to think about that. But teaching future generations these skills, again, very important and powerful. And giving them ownership over these practices is amazing. But you need to take ownership over your own self-care as well. Remember, self-care is a choice. And if you do design your own breath, be sure to send it to me. I would love to see what you come up with and what you create. And speaking of sending me things or reaching out and working with me, just a friendly reminder that I offer lots of professional development workshops and presentations to schools, businesses, and organizations anywhere from 1 to 10 hours on topics related to self-care, building resilience, avoiding burnout, trauma-sensitive classrooms, growth mindset, and more. I also have a special program in the works launching later this year for youth, all centered around self-care that I'm really, really excited about. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. But thanks for listening to this episode, and remember to subscribe and rate this podcast on your preferred player. The ratings really do help us grow and share the message of self-care. And if you ever have comments or suggestions or questions, reach out to me directly by emailing podcast@drmcselfcare.com. That's drmcselfcare.com. And come join the cast party at Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret, very active on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. MC Self-Care. Or, of course, my website, drmcselfcare.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, and love me across all my social media platforms for the most up-to-date information on self-care. See you next time. Stay well and do good.